I need another 1,000.
I admire your courage, Miss...
Trench. Sylvia Trench. I admire your luck, Mr.
Bond. James Bond.
Dr. No is a 1962 spy film directed by Terence Young, based off the 1958 Ian Fleming novel of the same name. This film would launch the character of James Bond into cinematic history. The head of MI6, Military Intelligence in London, England, M, played by Bernard Lee, is informed that the MI6 station chief in Jamaica, John Strangeways, played by Timothy Moxon, as well as his secretary, were murdered by assassins. He assigns the case to MI6 intelligence officer James Bond, played by Sean Connery.
Jamaica went off the air tonight, just like that, right in the middle of the opening procedure. We've checked up and Strangways has disappeared. So's his secretary. She was a new girl, we'd only just sent her out there.
Or was Strangways on something special?
Well, he was checking an inquiry from the Americans. They've been complaining about massive interference with their Cape Canaveral rockets.
Bond, a tall, handsome womanizer with several vices, heads to Jamaica to find out if the murder was related to the case involving the CIA with regard to rocket launch disruptions from Cape Canaveral. Bond meets with Quarrel, a Cayman Island man played by John Kitzmiller, who was employed by Strangeways before his murder, as well as Felix Leiter, a CIA agent involved in the case, played by Jack Lord.
Cape Canaveral is screaming because with this moon rocket launching schedule, they don't want anything to go wrong.
And yet you say Strangways didn't think the interference could be coming from here?
Right. Strangways and Quarrel checked the offshore islands.
You found nothing?
Not a thing.
Where did you look?
Just about most everywhere. Fire Island, Crab Key.
Leiter informs James Bond that the CIA traced the rocket radio jamming to Jamaica, and that the deceased agent was hot on the case near the fictional island of Crab Key, right off the Jamaican coast. Bond visits a man named Professor Dent, played by Anthony Dawson, whom Strangeways saw just before he was killed. After discovering that Strangeways had been finding radioactive mineral samples on the island, Bond confronts Dent. Dent attempts to have Bond killed by a deadly tarantula. Bond winds up killing the spider and confronting Dent himself.
Who are you working for, Professor?
Well, you might as well know, as you won't live to use the information.
I'm working for...
Mr. Smith & Wesson. And you've had your 6.
James Bond heads to the island of Crab Key, where he runs into a beautiful shell diver named Honey Ryder, played by Ursula Andress.
What's your name?
Ryder.
Ryder what?
Honey Ryder. What's so funny about it?
Nothing. It's a very pretty name.
What's your name?
James. Tell me, honey, did you use your sail all the way up to the reef here?
Of course, I always do.
Then they'll know we're here. They have radar.
Oh, my boat is too small to be noticed. And I often come here to get the shells. At first, they used to try to catch me, but they couldn't. Now I don't think they bother anymore.
Well, they will this time.
After being confronted by armed guards, the two are taken to the underground lair of Dr. Julius No, played by Joseph Wiseman.
Tell me, does the toppling of American missiles really compensate for having no hands?
Missiles are only the first step to prove our power.
Our power? With your disregard for human life, you must be working for the East.
East, west, just points of the compass, each as stupid as the other. I'm a member of Spectre.
Spectre?
Spectre. Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, Extortion.
A member of the secret organization Spectre, Dr. No has been planning an attempt at disrupting the United States space launches. It's up to James Bond to stop Dr. No before it is too late.
I was curious to see what kind of a man you were. I thought there might even be a place for you with Spectre.
I prefer the revenge department. Of course, my first job would be finding the man who killed Strangways and Quarrel.
Unfortunately, I misjudged you. You are just a stupid policeman whose luck is run out.
This was chosen to be the inaugural movie in the James Bond film franchise, as the plot of the source novel was the most straightforward. It had only one major location, Jamaica, and only one big special effects set piece. Author Ian Fleming invented Spectre in 1959 to replace James Bond's usual Soviet Union enemies. Ian Fleming believed that the Cold War might eventually end and wanted to keep his spy thrillers relevant. Spectre included 21 people that included former Gestapo members, Soviet spy groups, and Italian, Corsican, and Turkish organized crime gangs. Its goals were profiteering from conflict between the superpowers and eventual world domination. It made a great fictional enemy for the James Bond novels. The movie was filmed from January through March of 1962. Patrick McEwen, Roger Moore, Trevor Howard, and Michael Redgrave were considered for the role of James Bond. This was the first James Bond movie, but Sean Connery was not the first James Bond. That honor belongs to Barry Nelson, who played James Bond on an episode of the CBS television series Climax on October 21st, 1954. Ian Fleming didn't originally like the casting of the 31-year-old Sean Connery as James Bond. Bond was English, whereas Sean Connery was Scottish. Bond was from an upper-class background, while Sean Connery came from a working-class background. While James Bond was supposed to be refined and educated, Fleming felt that Sean Connery was too rugged. After seeing the movie, Ian Fleming softened and decided that Sean Connery was perfectly cast. In the novel On Her Majesty's Secret Service, James Bond was revealed to have Scottish ancestry. The first scene Sean Connery filmed as James Bond is the scene in the Kingston airport where he passes a female photographer and holds his hat up in front of his face. It was filmed on the day of January 16th, 1962. Contrary to popular belief, Sean Connery was not wearing a hairpiece in his first two films portraying James Bond. He still had a decent amount of hair, and the filmmakers used varying techniques to make the most of what was left. Julie Christie was almost cast as Honey Rider, but Albert R. Broccoli reportedly thought that her breasts were too small. Anita Egbert was also considered for the role, although I'm sure her breast size was not an issue. Sean Connery was morbidly afraid of spiders. The shot of the spider in his bed was done with a sheet of glass between him and the spider, which can be seen in one shot of the movie. When this didn't look realistic enough, additional close-up scenes were reshot with stuntman Bob Simmons. According to Stephen J. Rubin's 1981 book, The James Bond Films, the tarantula was named Rosie. Ursula Andress and Sean Connery fought over a record player so they could practice the song Honey and Bond sing together, Under the Mango Tree, which is notable for being the only instance of James Bond singing in the entire film series. Diana Copeland ended up dubbing for Ursula Andress as her singing voice.
Underneath the mango tree, my honey and me.
James Bond tells Honey Rider,
I can assure you my intentions are strictly honorable.
This line would be repeated 27 years later by Mark Harmon in Sean Connery's 1988 film, The Presidio.
Thank you. About your daughter, sir. I want you to know my intentions are strictly honorable.
The James Bond theme, written by Monty Norman and performed by John Barry and orchestra, debuted on the UK charts on November 1st, 1962, and peaked at number 13. It entered the US charts on July 27th, 1963, and went to number 82. Sean Connery's suits for this film were made by Savile Row tailor Anthony Sinclair. Sinclair stated that a truly great suit would be able to stand up to a great deal of abuse, such as grabbing by the lapels, and still look good afterwards. To prove his point, Sean Connery was asked to sleep in the suit. When he woke up the next morning, he was stunned to see that it looked fantastic. Maurice Binder designed the gun barrel opening at the last minute by pointing a pinhole camera through a real gun barrel. The actor in the sequence is not Sean Connery, but stuntman Bob Simmons. Sean Connery didn't film the sequence until the movie Thunderball in 1965. The world premiere was held on October 5, 1962 at the London Pavilion. It was attended by Sean Connery, Zena Marshall, and Ian Fleming. The movie's United States release was stalled by the political climate following the Cuban Missile Crisis in October 1962. Dr. No grossed a worldwide total of $6 million, making it a box office success compared to its $1 million budget. Through the many re-releases, the film has grossed at least $59.5 million, and likely more. Dr. No was first shown on American television by ABC on November 10, 1974. It was also the first Bond movie to be broadcast on British television by ITV on October 28, 1975. After the release of this film, Ian Fleming's spy novels became very popular, as did the popularity of secret agent films and television shows that flourished in the 1960s. Spy comedy films like 1966's Our Man Flint, or spy television shows like NBC's The Man from U.N.C.L.E. were all the rage, as were games and toys. It is estimated that since Dr. No, a quarter of the world's population have seen at least one James Bond film. I like this movie, and I think the story is quite simple and easy to follow for being the first James Bond film. It's iconic, and I always thought Sean Connery was an awesome actor. Despite other actors who did a great job playing James Bond, Pierce Brosnan in the 1990s when I was a kid, Sean Connery, to me, is and always will be the true James Bond. Always. While I personally would probably say this movie is an 8-star film, the iconic and historic nature of the movie and all that came after is a reason for me to give this film 10 stars. I highly recommend the first James Bond film, Dr. No.